So even though I did my wire tuck 4 years ago, I'm going to try to give you guys an overview of how to do a wire tuck in your own car, the things you're going to need and the things that you need to do. First and foremost, before you do anything, masking tape and a Sharpie. You're going to need to label every single connector. You don't need a wiring diagram, none of that matters. As long as you properly label every single connector, make a nice clear description of injector 1, injector 2, injector 3, ignition coil 1, 2, mass airflow sensor, however you need to label it so you know where that plug is supposed to go, and you should have zero issues. Now, of course, all of the plugs are only designed to go to one type of plug. However, all of your ignition coil plugs are the same, and all of your injector plugs are the same. So if you mess that up, the car will not run, and it will be very annoying trying to figure out which plug goes to which coil after you've jumbled it up. So label everything. I'm going to say it one more time. Label everything. Then you can start unplugging things. So once you unplug it and plug the entire engine harness, pull it back from the engine and sit it aside. And what you're going to do is start pulling apart the loom, and you can then reroute it a different way. So as you can tell, I forgot the X-Acto knife, and that is what you're going to need to cut off the old loom. So be very careful, cut very, very gently along the seam of the plastic loom that is going around all of the wires, because you're going to need to remove all of that so you can route it how you want. So start unraveling things. You can look at what it's labeled and try and figure out where it's supposed to go. And really this part is just up to you. It's how do you want to route it? Do you want it routed pretty much the same as stock? You're just trying to clean it up? Do you want it completely different? All of mine is tucked up under the plenum and behind the plenum, so you can't see almost any of the wires. You can do it however you want. You can go as extreme or as mild as you want to, but there are a lot of different brackets and clamps and all sorts of things holding this 350Z loom in place. So X-Acto knife, snips, and pliers are going to be your friends. You're also probably going to need a couple screwdrivers for getting out different clips and clamps and things. And of course, a 10mm ratchet is going to help because almost everything is held down by a 10mm bolt. So once everything is in place and you figure out where you want it, this is the type of loom that I use. I love this loom. It is a split braided loom. So there's a braided loom where it's not split and you have to scrunch it up and slip it over the wire. That's not really helpful. I don't like that as much. I accidentally bought it once by accident and it's still sitting in my toolbox unused. This stuff, however, is great. So you can spread it out, wrap it around the wire, and then use zip ties or electrical tape to hold it in place. You can get it in these little itty bitty tiny, like, I think this is for 1/4 inch, I believe. Now, they will spread out to much larger, so I could fit this on a larger group of wires if I needed to. But you can get these little tiny ones, and you can get these really big ones too. So I've got all sorts of different sizes. It's not particularly cheap. The plastic loom cover, you can get that all day for really, really cheap. I don't like how it looks. This split loom looks very professional, very motorsport. It's really nice. Of course, it's going to protect your wire, so from any sort of abrasion or anything like that, it's going to do a great job. Now, you can also use heat shrink to try and hold it on. The problem is most of the connectors are going to be really big and a wire going into it might be really small. And if you depend all your connectors, yes, you could use a heat shrink. I didn't use any of it. I just used the electrical tape, and it's been sitting like that for 4 years with no issues. And if the electrical tape starts to come undone and your sheath starts to move a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. You're not going to have any sort of electrical shortage or sparks or fire risk. So it's not as big a deal to use heat shrink here as it is if you were splicing a wire or something like that. One thing that is great is these little hold downs. So you can use this to help keep your routed wire in place. So wherever you want to put it and whatever size you need, of course they make in all sorts of different sizes. Some of the time I did have to drill out this hole to make it a little bit bigger to get an M6 bolt through here. But for the most part, everything worked out pretty smooth. But this is all the tools that you're going to need to do this. So really anyone should be able to do it. It's a very cheap thing to do. For less than $100, you can do the entire harness with zip ties and brackets and loom and all of that, and it'll look beautiful. You just need a lot of time. So it took me about 5 hours on an afternoon. I just one day decided I was gonna do it, started unplugging things, pulling things out of the way, laying the loom back, and started just working from there. While usually I do not enjoy doing wiring at all, I actually found this to be really enjoyable. I had a lot of fun figuring out where I wanted to route things and how I wanted to hide them. So for example, the mass airflow sensor originally was sitting on top of this pipe. I've now got it so that it's facing down. There's a heat shield between the header and the sensor, and I haven't had any issues with it. Multiple track days, lots of street miles, no problem. But it's facing down, so you can see right here, this wire, which is tucked next to the solenoid, comes down underneath the intake and then plugs into the mass airflow sensor, so you can't see that wire anymore. All of the wires for the ignition coils are tucked up under the plenum, and I started from the back forward. So I've got this first coil plugged in here, and it works its way back, and so all of them are just tucked under here. Same thing for the injectors. Nice and tucked underneath the plenum. This also gets easier as you remove items. So right here, there's a bolt underneath this little headlight clamp, and that connects my grounding wire here that I added for my DIY grounding kit. And it also has the ground for the headlight, which all of that is rounded underneath the strut tower now. So it's tucked up above the A-arm, but underneath the strut tower, coming through a hole that's over here behind this vanity cover. So you can't see the big wiring harness that originally came right here and then plugged into the headlight and the horns and all that. So both of those harnesses on this side and on the passenger side are tucked away. There's no wires going across the front of the engine. Originally it came from the passenger side and wrapped around the front. Instead, I flipped all that to the back of the engine and then worked my way forward to keep everything nice and clean and out of the way. So not only is all of that extra wire tucked out of my way for when I'm working on things, it's a lot easier for me to get in there. Originally, there was a huge harness going over all the ignition coils, so doing a plug change was really annoying. It was difficult to try and snake through all the wires. Now, I could do a plug change, no time at all. Pop out the intake, I've got access to all of them, all of the plugs, it's nice and easy. And then of course, the weight of that wiring is now sitting behind the engine. So yes, I only moved it a couple feet back, but everything adds up on a race car. Now you will be left with some extra wiring because originally it's supposed to go all over the engine bay and you're making a much more concise and simple routing. So what I did is I just kind of have it wrapped up and tucked behind the engine. It's sitting just below the plenum but above the transmission, so I don't have to worry about heat. And while of course it is possible to shorten all of those wires, I don't think it's worth it. You're just asking for a mistake. If one splice is wrong, you have to go through every single one and check them again. And some of these wires are very sensitive to the resistance that they are seeing. So if you shorten the wire, the resistance is going to go down and it might change how the sensor is reading. So I just left everything intact and just moved that wire out of the way. So you can see more evidence of the wire tuck over here. So I do have some more wires over here because some of these are going down to my alternator and they're going down to various different items and sensors in the front of the car. But everything is tucked down and out of the way, trying to keep it as far from the line of sight and from important places as possible. The only ignition coil that's difficult to get to is this one on the front passenger side right here. Everything else is nice and easy. Even then, once everything's unplugged, I can move this whole group out of the way as a harness. As you can see, I've got a couple zip ties on here trying to hold it together. So instead of having wires everywhere, it's just one wire right there in the middle. There's also a few other things I did, like there's a ground that was originally up front and center and it's now tucked down on the inside of the frame rail. So anything I can do to move things out of the way so you don't have to see it. So instead you can focus on things like the engine and the intake and things that people actually want to see. And if you look back here, you can see where I've got all the extra wire bunched up. And then what does go out of the engine bay and into the interior of the car, I've got that nice big split loom on it, so what you can see in the back is at least aesthetically pleasing. So while this is not for everyone and not everyone cares about things like this, for me it was a great way to spend an afternoon. I get a lot of compliments on it. People are always asking me about it. It makes it look really good at car shows or even in the pits when you take your hood off and people come over to look at your car after a session. It's just nice to have a really good looking engine bay. I'm going to cover the whole engine bay in a later video. And of course, if you guys have any questions about this, you can drop them in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.